We're all heading somewhere. Hopefully, where you're heading is a place you want to go. As a leader, hopefully, you're heading to a desirable place with your team. And a man named Bill George, who you may have heard of, talks to us about finding our true north destination. That phrase, true north, comes mostly from this man, Bill George, who I've interviewed recently, and you're about to listen into our conversation. This was a part of our virtual LeaderCon event, 4 days of conversations and exploration with leadership experts like Bill. Now, in this very special episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, we're going to listen in to my conversation with Bill George about finding our true north. Welcome, everybody. We're glad that you're here. I heard in the background that Bill is sitting in a conference room in the Minneapolis airport, and he just landed after flying in from Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Is that right? So we're glad that you've taken some time with us this morning, Bill. If you all don't know Bill George, let me tell you about Bill, and you're going to wish you already knew, but you'll be glad that you know now. Bill George is the former chairman and chief executive officer of Medtronic. He is a senior fellow at the Harvard Business School, where he's taught leadership since 2004 after he finished his time at Medtronic. He's the author of a ton of books, almost all of which have the phrase True North in them. Discover Your True North, Discover Your True North Field Book, True North, Finding Your True North, 7 Lessons for Leading in Crisis, True North Groups, and today some ideas from his newest book, which I think has just came out last month.
Last week.
True North. Merging Leader Edition. And for all of you that were here before, you see I've got my little notes here, so you never know what I might show up asking you, Bill, here. Welcome. So glad you're here, Bill.
Thank you, Kevin. I'm honored to be with you.
So I think we should probably start. And by the way, if any of you are wondering, I have 2 copies to give away.
Thank you.
You can't have mine. They all were asking about mine. You can't have mine because, first of all, mine is the advanced reader copy. So that's like a special edition. But I got 2 of these to give away that we will give away in the next little while. But Bill, since I sort of teased you by saying so many of your books have True North in the title, we should just start there. You sort of own that phrase, but let's start there. What does True North mean?
Your true north, Kevin, is who you are at your essence. Your beliefs, your values, and the principles you lead by. It also is the place you find the greatest satisfaction in your life. And I think it's all those things coming together, knowing who you are. And it's actually much harder than you think for people, particularly leaders, to know who they are. Because oftentimes people want to go out and earn money, gain power, and fame before they really are grounded in their essence and who they are. It's unique for each of us.
So that could be a pretty good place to start. But the question that I'm going to be asking most everybody, Bill, as we start my conversations with them is this question. What's the big idea you want to talk about today? It could certainly be that, but what's the big thing that you'd like people to get, or for us to talk about, or for people to leave with after our 45 minutes together?
Kevin, we're going through a massive change in leadership. The baby boomers have been in charge for the last 30 years or more, and it's time for the next generation, which I'm terming emerging leaders, including Gen X, millennials, and the younger Gen Zs, to step up and take over because they have led through and been through the crises of the last 20 years, which seem to be never ending. And I think they're more in touch with what the needs of millennials are. The whole mode of leadership has changed dramatically. And I was coming up, it was all about command and control. GE was a role model company. Jack Welch was a role model leader. I didn't lead like that. Many other people didn't. But I think today it's all about empowering the people you work with and enabling them to reach their full potential. That's been my mission for 30, 40 years, to try to help leaders, just like you are, Kevin, trying to help leaders reach their full potential. So it's not about you. It's really being a servant of the people you're working with.
Oh, so Emily says she's a rising millennial. So I'm not real big on labels, everybody, but if you're a millennial, just give us a millennial in in the chat. You can all tell that neither Bill or I are that. So just give us that you're a millennial, just because. Just see, because I want to keep you chatting over there is what we're trying to do. So you can put whatever label you want to put over there. Katrina says she's a proud Xer, so you don't have to be a millennial. Just tell us over there what you are. I don't know what I am. I'm just Kevin. But Bill, there's 4 things that you talk about in this book to get at that point. And I'll just sort of frame us that way. And the 4 parts of the journey are: discover yourself, which you sort of hinted at. There's more to it than that. We're going to get at that in a minute. Develop yourself, lead people, and navigate today's challenges. We sort of talked, there they all come, X and Y's and M's and suches. So you sort of talked a little about the first one, like discovering ourselves, and the last one a little bit about the fact that there are these challenges. So we're going to get at all of those things as we go. But as I have told people, I'm gonna pick quotes from everyone's books that I'm talking to as a way to start. And so it's not a quiz. I'm not going to tell you what page I'm on or anything. I'm just going to read you this. This is for everyone to hear, and then Bill, I want you to respond to it. You wrote early in the book, actually, page 2. As it turns out, the hardest person you will ever have to lead is yourself. Talk about that.
I think, I took me a long time to learn how to lead myself, because I think we have to learn self-awareness. You're born with your IQ. It's built in, but your emotional intelligence is not. It's something you learn through relationships with other people. Leadership is all about building enduring and authentic relationships. And that takes time to learn what to do and what not to do. I was the kid who tried too hard to jump into leadership too early, lost 7 elections in a row before I finally woke up, and some people gave me some very sound advice and said, Bill, no one's ever going to want to work with you, much less be led by you, because you're moving so fast to get ahead. You don't take time for other people. And that was like a blow to the solar plexus, because they were right. And I had to do my own self-help leadership development plan for the next year, trying to figure out and build those relationships and get honest feedback from people. And I think that's why it's so hard, because a lot of people think leadership is about your title, how much money you're making, where you are in the organization. How do I get to the next level? It's the ladder theory of management. This is totally flawed. Sheryl Sandberg talks about the jungle gym, like kids in jungle. You go up, you go down, but you gain experience working with different types of people in different situations. That's how you become a leader.
Okay, everybody, it's not like you already heard that with different words from Roger a few minutes ago. Just saying, in case you need to make the connection, everybody. So one of the areas that you talk about is a chapter in the book about how we discover ourselves is through the crucibles of leadership. And so I'd like us to talk about that a little bit. What does a crucible mean to you? And then more directly, how do we use that to build our leadership? You sort of hinted at it a little bit with the feedback that you got at Georgia Tech, but take us beyond that. Let's dive into the crucibles a little bit more.
Well, Kevin, we've interviewed 220 people of leaders, and they tell us their story. And what's significant are not their successes. It's times they failed. It's times they've had really tough times for personal health, loss of siblings, parents divorced, being rejected by a male or female partner, getting fired from their jobs, all these things. And those tend to become the more formative things, because when you are doing well and everything's going your way, you start to think you're a better leader than you are. But when it all gets stripped away, you have to look yourself in the mirror and say, who am I? And what do I really want to be? And what's really important to me? Until you get grounded in that essence of who you are. As long as it's about money, fame, and power, no one's ever today is ever going to want to work with you or follow you. So I think that it's all about you. And you have to flip that switch and take what I call the I to we journey, and go from being an I leader. And let's face it, we start out, how do we get into college? People look at our grades. I played tennis. It's about, I had to win my singles match. When you start out in work, you typically start out as an individual contributor. And so to become a real leader, you have to make that journey to realizing it's not about you, it's about people on your team. And your job is to enable them to become successful. You're more like a coach than you are a director or a manager.
Yeah, I think that's so So right. And if you everybody, if you take that back to what we were talking about with Roger just before um, Bill joined us, talking about the experience, learning from the experience is a part of the learning process, right? It's like we can have these things happen, but if we're not willing to stop, as Bill said, look in the mirror and say, what does this mean? It's not going to help, right? It's not going to help. So taking the time to do that. One of the one of the things, again, the whole journey, lots of stuff we could talk. Actually, it's not on the list. I want you to talk a little bit more about the I versus we, because I think that's so important. Uh, you highlighted it just now, but let's talk a little deeper about. You talked about sort of why it happens, why we might default to I versus we. Talk a little bit more about how we make the shift.
Well, first of all, this is more important than ever because millennials don't want to work for someone when it's all about them. They're not interested in helping you become successful or make more money. They want to fulfill their own dreams and hopes. And if you're not interested in helping them do that, they don't want to work with you. They may give you the so-called, they may give you their brains, but they're not going to give you their hearts. And leadership today is all about leading with the heart. So you've got to make that shift to become a servant leader, as Robert Greenleaf once described. That's your job. The people are out there to serve you. We've thought about that. Oh, I have a huge organization. They do what I tell them to. Doesn't work today. That shift is you're really there to serve the people that work for you and your peers, as well as your subordinates and even your bosses. But if you just serve your bosses, you're not going to make it today. And that's the big shift from the baby boomers to the Gen Xers and the millennials. And that's how
And,
people want to be empowered. They're not going to want to work for somebody that it's all about them. They want to be empowered to reach their goals and they want to see that they can fulfill their purpose. That's why a lot of people are resigning today, this great resignation, because they find, nothing but working for the man, so to speak, but not really having the opportunity to fulfill their own desires.
I think we've got a question that I want to. There it is. So the question Sandy asks, you said it's time for the next generation to step up. You also said it takes time to gain experience. So how do you balance that, right? Does it have to be the next generation if someone with the right mindset is ready to step up? So I guess her question is really about the balance between being ready to step up and and having had the experience to do so.
Well, I encourage you to step up right now. Don't wait for somebody to tap you on the shoulder. You don't need to get that title. I was just with a 27-year-old woman that led a group of us, an outdoor experience for the last 6 days. She was a fantastic leader. She has no direct reports, but she knew how to bring people together, and and be very flexible. And that's what we were looking for today. So I encourage people. We've had this idea of the leader is that CEO up on top, and we all have to do what he, because most of them were men, wants us to do. And that's such a flawed notion. And frankly, millennials are not going to work for somebody like that. And so give people the opportunity now. I had an opportunity at 27 to start the consumer microwave oven business for Litton Industries when there was no microwave oven market. This is 1970. It was a great experience. And yeah, I was over my head and hired people twice my age and twice my salary, but we had enormous success for 8.5, 9 years. So I learned to depend on people who knew a lot more than I did about the marketplace, about the technology, about manufacturing. And that was just a great learning experience. But you learn to depend upon your subordinates, upon people you work with, and don't think you can do it all yourself. So I think that's a big idea here to flip. Someone said, let's flip the organization upside down. I think it was Matt. Matt's absolutely right. Let's put the customer on top, Kevin. Who are we serving? Are you serving your clients? Are you serving? And then let's put the frontline employees at the next level. And then all the rest of us come in a triangle. We're there to support the front line. And who was it that saved us during COVID? It wasn't people like us sitting at home on Zoom screens. It was all those people out delivering food or manufacturing life-saving products, or like my son, who's a surgeon at UCSF. You don't do surgery from home. He had to be out there, and they're risking their lives. Or a barista at Starbucks, or a stock clerk at Target. These people, or somebody in the Amazon warehouse, these people are all frontline workers. That's over half the workforce. And I think we haven't understood that our job is to make them successful. We've had too many people in the middle trying to minimize that. And one of the key learnings here, Kevin, is do you look at the people in your organization as a cost or an asset? And throughout the 90s and really the last 20 years, we tended to look at labor, so to speak, as a cost. And how do we minimize it? And, Macy's takes all the support people off the floor. Bob Nadelli tried to do that at Home Depot and almost sunk the place. Those are the people that make you go, that really know what's going on. Those people that have been trying to go out and work with doctors that can help them. That's the people that make the organization go. People on a manufacturing line that know that quality is the most important thing. It's not just lowest cost. So I said once to an organization recently that has 300,000 people, you love your brands as a consumer organization. You love your brands. They're fantastic. You love your products. But you know what? The value of this organization walks out the door every night when they go home. And if you don't value those people and make this a great place to work, you're never going to be successful.
And my take on that, and I agree 100%. My take on that is that that's always been true. It's just that the millennials and younger are smarter, Bill, than our generations were, because they're not willing to put up with living in the yes sir world. It's not that we, when we were 25 or 30, didn't want that too. It's just that we weren't smart enough to know to ask for it. So I think we're really talking about human behavior here. And so while it's super important for us to think about it in terms of these generations, it's truly human behavior. And that when we can, as someone said in the chat earlier, when we can engage people's brains and their heart, then we got something. And that's what we really want to try and get to. And I think that's what you're saying. There's a couple of great, did you want to say something about that?
Yeah, I want to comment on that. Leadership today has shifted from leading with the head to leading with the heart as well as the head. And by the heart, my colleague Hubert Jorillo wrote a book, The Heart of Business. David Gergen, colleague at Harvard, has written a book called Hearts Touched by Fire. Yeah, you can't engage people just with their heads. The differential is when people give you their hearts. And what do I mean by that? To lead with your heart, you have to have high level of self-awareness, as Satya Nadella says. We have to be learn-it-alls, not know-it-alls. Second, you need to have compassion for the people you're serving, and particularly your customers. And you need to have empathy for the employees, the challenges people are going through today. And and you need to have a passion for the business. If leaders don't care, it's like a football coach doesn't care if they win or lose. Well, not going to do much of a job. But most important of all, you have to have courage. And I've seen some great managers have no courage. Reach the level of CEOs in their companies did not do well because they lack courage. So you have to have courage. You have to have courage to make decisions. You may make mistakes and it may not go well. There's no perfection out there. And you may be criticized. You may take a lot of shots. So those qualities of the heart, see, your IQ is pretty much the same from age 10 to 60. It doesn't really change. But your EQ, which I've just described, your emotional intelligence, you're not born of that. You grow these qualities by interacting with people. And the more different situations you're in, the more you can grow those qualities, as long as you want to do that.
We're going to talk very specifically about EQ, everybody. Not that I want you to stay all day or want you to come back, but at 4 Eastern time, you want to be here because that's exactly what we're going to talk about then, for sure. Bill, some questions have come in that I thought we'd chat on for a second. One is from Marina, who says, how do you recommend a subordinate back? How do you recommend the subordinate back the I to we journey with a supervisor who is more I focused? In other words, I'll reframe the question. How do we be influential to help others see and want to make that journey with us?
Boy, this is the big challenge. Every time I teach a class at Harvard, I say, do you have any toxic leaders in your organization? They all laugh at me because of course we do. And I think top management's been fooled by promoting a lot of people that look good on paper that really are not good leaders. And I think we need to move these people out. But if you're stuck with a boss like that, I've had a number of people ask me about this, calling, Bill, I'm getting ready to leave a great organization. Because today people don't leave companies, they leave bad managers. And if you're working for somebody like that, what I encourage you to do is try to figure out what your boss's needs are, make them look good, but continue to lead in the way you want to lead. And because you're making them look good, ask them to give you the freedom to lead the way you want to lead. Now, look, if it gets too bad, your boss is taking credit for everything you do or directing you and not allowing you to lead the way you want to lead. At a certain point in time, look for another job in the same organization. like I said, I had people call me from great organization. One of them said, you know, it's horrible. My boss is pushing me into the ground and won't give me any credit for what I'm doing. Next thing I know, he called back and he said she just got fired. So I said, well, I told you it was a good organization. They would. Another one works in one of the great organizations in the world, same thing, and he got it transferred to another department. And this person, whose ex-boss, wasn't very happy with him, but hey, he's flourishing. He actually got a promotion and doing extremely well. So hang in there. I don't think you have to change already. But if it gets bad enough, yes. You don't want to spend your life working for a toxic leader, because you say it won't rub off on you, it will rub off on you if you work long enough for a toxic leader. And if you start playing that game, you're not gonna flourish. You're not gonna fulfill your goals.
Um, we're talking with Bill George about True North, emerging leader edition, and I think Marina needs a copy. That was a great question, and she asked the question that he gets asked all the time. So Marina, info@virtualleadercon.com. Send us your mailing address. We can't mail it to you if we don't know where to send it. So there's one for you. We have some other questions that have come in. A couple of questions about mentoring. The question is, what about? And I'm gonna ask a couple of questions together. There's a comment about the importance or value of mentoring, and then Bill, what are your thoughts about reverse mentoring? How can more senior leaders learn more by getting some reverse mentoring as well? So thoughts about those two things.
Two great questions, Kevin, both extremely important. First of all, we all have to have mentors, wise leaders. And I think many of the baby boomers who've kind of done their thing, they can move aside and become mentors to younger people. And I think that's an extremely important role. I've had some great mentors. The reason I got that job at 27 is because I had a mentor that gave me the shot. When I went to Harvard Business School to teach, another professor kind of taught me the ropes of academia, because I didn't know anything about it. I'm not trying to be an academic, but I still have to know the ropes. And then he eventually became our dean, didn't know you. Now, reverse mentoring is fantastic. I mentor a lot of people, but I tell you, they mentor me. And I think particularly, I wrote this book with Zach Clayton, who is a fantastic tech entrepreneur, 37 years old, founded his company. The country hit some rough spots, but it's flourishing now, thanks to his leadership. But I've learned more from him. I went to him to help me with social media, and he taught me about how to use social media. So I actually love social media because he taught me how to use it well and what not to do. So I think we need reverse mentors. You know who really needs them, Kevin, are boards of directors, because most of the board members are around 60 or 70. And sometimes I've had people say, oh, these millennials, they just want to change jobs all the time. I said, I'll tell you why they're changing jobs. Because your company has no purpose. If the only purpose, as it was at General Electric, is making money, I don't want to spend my whole life toiling away trying to make the bosses and shareholders more money. I know how to do that, but that's not how I want to spend my life. We have to have a sense of purpose, a deep sense of purpose. And so I think boards would do well to have some people in their 40s for sure, maybe even younger, on their board to learn more. And I think they don't do that, and that's a form of diversity that they're lacking right now.
I'm gonna shout out, and this may not be the only place it's true, but I know it's true here. So I am a proud alum of Purdue University, and Purdue has for many years had a student member of the board, and it's to that very point, right? Like they're one of the major constituencies from which this organization exists, and so I've long felt, and if truth were told, wish I have been that person. But the reality is, I think it's a tremendous example. And I'm not saying it's the only one, but I think it's a really good one. I love that. So Elizabeth makes a comment, and I know that everybody, what you're doing in the comments in the chat is fantastic. It's exactly what we want. And I'm going to tell you that I'm not going to be able to keep up with all of it. So if I don't happen to mention yours, I don't want you to get upset in any way. But I see Elizabeth's question about being vulnerable. Do you have any comment about, I'm sure that you do, Bill, about our role as a leader and how vulnerability, our willingness to be vulnerable plays into that and our success?
I think you have to be vulnerable. When you make a mistake, you got to admit your mistake. I started my career working U.S. Department of Defense under Robert McNamara, a brilliant man, far more brilliant I could ever be. But, no one can ever make mistakes. And you won't believe there were tens of thousands of people trying to cover up the mistakes we made in Vietnam, to be honest. So I think as a leader, I've got to admit my vulnerabilities, my mistakes. If I set myself up on a pedestal, like I'm above you folks, and how can you admit your mistakes to me? And the only way you can have an organization is for people to come forward and say, "Hey, we screwed up here, boss," or here's what happened, or here's what went wrong. And then you can get help. I used to tell people, I need to know about those things. I'm not clairvoyant. And you'll never get fired at Medtronic for making a mistake, but you will get fired for covering one up because we need to know what's going on. Then we can get the best people in the company, or if we have to call in, just in Medtronic's case, best doctors from around the world, help us solve a problem. We can do that. So vulnerability is power, because you have the power then, because no one can say, "Oh, you don't admit your mistakes," so you don't get into all that. You can be really honest. And it's interesting. A good role model for leadership is Alcoholics Anonymous organization, which the first thing you say is, "I'm an alcoholic." Okay, I told you that. You aren't looking at me like, "Oh, some guy can't control his alcohol." No, that's who I am. And so I think doing that, we've opened up the whole LGBTQ role, where so many people were forced to be in the closet because they couldn't admit who they were. Now people can openly say, "I have a husband," or I have colleagues at Harvard say, female professor, "I have a wife." Great, wonderful. I'd like to meet her. And I think that's so important. We can be who we are, not force people to be something they're not.
I love that. I would be remiss to let some of you that are here to not acknowledge you. We've we've we dove right in with Bill, and there's a lot of folks here on in Virtual LeaderCon, and there are some of you that are here on LinkedIn Live. Now you're hearing these words about a minute after I'm saying them, but you're here and we're glad that you're here. And so I hope there's some comments going on there as well that I can't see at this moment. It failed. My team just said we're not live on LinkedIn. It failed. So never mind, everybody, about that. We'll just move on. Speaking of vulnerability, so oh well, we'll move on from there. So you were just talking about a couple of things about from vulnerability, and then you sort of moved into sort of how people are different, and there's a lot of discussion these days about being inclusive as a leader. And in your chapter in the book about inclusive leadership, I like it because you took a broader look at that than I think a lot of people do. Like, that word inclusion has become an important word in the language, a touchstone in our language, and yet I think it's paradoxically been pigeonholed a bit. So from your perspective, let's talk about what it means to be an inclusive leader.
Well, I think you look at who the real people are. You don't look at them through external, things like gender, race, religion, sexual identity, any of the or national origin. But more important, I joined an organization where I came in at 38, and everyone else had joined at 22, and I wasn't ever felt like I was fully included in that organization. So you want to create, Kevin, a sense of belonging. I really belong here. That's what we try to do at Medtronic. Everyone, we share a common goal of restoring people to full life and health by restoring their health, extending their life, and and alleviating their pain. And this became something we come together around, that common bond. It was an external bond. If it's an internal goal, we're just trying to make $3.91 a share. See, people don't feel a sense of belonging yet. No one's going to feel, "Oh, I belong to an organization that makes $3.91 a share. Isn't that fantastic?" Really? No, but I belong to an organization that's doing great things for people. Hubert Joly understood that at Best Buy, went from hard sell to trying to help people with technology. And it became a huge unifying force around that company. And not to be hard sell, but build relationship with customers. And it changed everything. So I think you really have to understand that that's so important, that we unite around a clear sense of purpose. And so that's why I'm a strong advocate for creating an organization where everyone feels like they belong in there. Otherwise, how can they perform their best? If I go to a meeting, my wife used to say that she was the only woman in the room in a business meeting, and she'd say something and people would kind of ignore her. And then 10 minutes later, someone across the room would say the same thing. "Oh yeah, that's a great idea." And so we need to overcome that and make sure that we're not just hearing the loud voices in the room. We're hearing the people that may have more to say, but are quieter, and you have to draw them out. So these are all things about how you make sure they're included. In every business meeting I had before we made a decision, we went around the room and asked everyone, you've heard all the issues, you've heard the pros, you've heard the cons. What's your opinion? Then we'll make a decision rather than just let the loudest voices in the room dominate. So there are subtleties to inclusion that go way beyond the external factors we normally think of. And what I'm against is saying, oh, we have diversity in our organization. And I saw this at Goldman Sachs before David Solomon took over. We have great diversity. I said, this is great. How come no women, no people of color have ever run a major business here? And David Solomon came in as CEO, and within a year, he had promoted a dozen people of color and a dozen women to 24 people to key roles in that organization, including run one of their most important businesses. So I think that attitude of feeling like we need to get people who really can contribute and give them the opportunity to feel fully included.
You see if there's one more. Whoops. Now I lost there we go. Get my screen back. I'm going to look at the questions the group has asked, but while I'm looking at those, Bill, what's the question I didn't ask that you wish I would have?
Well, I think we've covered a lot of territory. And I think one of the questions is, are the millennials and Gen Xers really ready to step up? And see, that's where I see different roles in life. So I use a lot of baby boomers who I consider role models for the next generation. I mentioned Hubert. I mentioned Corey Berry, now the CEO of Best Buy. I would mention Mary Barra at General Motors, Satya Nadella. These are baby boomers who are role models for the next generation. So the question is, what are the roles they're going to have? See, I see a lot of times the senior leaders more as coaches. So that's the question I have. How do you empower people? And I would answer my own question, Kevin, by saying we have a chapter called The Leader is Coach. Well, what's that mean? It's an acronym. First thing you have to do today, people have to know you care about them. Until they know you care about them, they're not going to give you their hearts. I can assure you of that. And then you organize people into what we call their sweet spots. Think of a sports team. You want to get everyone, like a soccer team, in the best position field for them that maximizes their strengths, minimize their weaknesses, and where they're highly motivated. Then you align them around the mission and values. And then I think coaches can be very challenging. I think as a coach, you need to challenge your people to step up, give you their best game. One of the worst ideas I've heard, Kevin, is the idea of quiet quitting. This is the new thing everyone's writing about. I mean, why would you stay in a job and I'm just going to do the absolute minimum? I mean, would you spend your life doing that? That's horrible. If you're really unhappy, quit. But find a place. And so I think as leaders, we need to challenge people. Kevin, are you giving us your best game today? I'm not sure. I think there's so much more you can do. And to help you, I can help you. Others can help you become an even better leader. So it's not a soft kind of leadership. And then finally, the final H is help. Get down and help people. Work with them. Get out of the meetings in the ivory tower and get out on the front lines and work with your people. I remember Hubert, when he first went to Best Buy, he put on a CEO and training blue jersey and worked with the salespeople to learn. Yeah, you got to do that. Lakshman Narasimhan is just going in as Starbucks, and he's saying he's going to take 20 hours of barista training to learn how to be a barista, see if he can pass the test. And he said, I'm not sure I will. Well, I think that's, I was in Day's Journal. I know Lakshman well. That's really humility, and that's modesty. I want to learn what people are doing. I went and saw 700 to 1,000 procedures when I was CEO of Medtronic, where I put on the greens, work with a doctor, and not work with them, just observe them.
We don't need you to have anything in your hands, Bill.
No, I didn't. But I can tell you, I learned a heck of a lot. But I think good leaders today need to be out on the front lines, helping their people, observing what's going on. Otherwise, you get isolated and you're looking at statistics and you get fooled if you don't know the realities. What's the culture you have, Kevin? You obviously understand that extremely well in your work.
Well, there's a question that's been asked that I think is connected to that. So I'm going to ask that now. Brian asks, what's the easiest way to change the perspective that people on the ground can't make change to the organization? Like, how do we help people realize that they can make change from where they are? That's my reframe of the question.
It's a leader's job to empower them to do that. Again, think of the coach. Are you going to listen to your players telling you at halftime what's wrong, why you're losing the game? what are the mistakes, and then make adjustments. You're going to listen to your people, or you're just going to say, do this, do that. We have all the answers. I think it's that openness to feedback. And I think feedback, as I talk about in the book, is the breakfast of champions. And good leaders get feedback. The best feedback you get is from your peers and your subordinates. At Harvard Business School, I've taught there for 19 years. I never teach a class so I don't get feedback. Some of it's kind of painful, about how I come across or something. And I learned so much from that feedback. My son, you say, why are you underlining in red all the critical comments, Dad? And I say, because that's where you learn. You learn from feedback. If you want to grow, you need to get feedback about how you can become better in whatever you're doing, teaching, leading, mentoring, anything like that. So.
And Olivier says, and being curious to receive the feedback. It's one thing to ask for it or have it show up, because I'm guessing at Harvard, it's going to show up in the course evals, right? It's going to show up. But the question is, are you curious enough to really to want to understand it and to move from there? I love that.
So, Kevin, one of the things, just to interrupt you, I never go into a class where I don't honestly want to learn from the students or their executive participants or the CEO course we run. I'm there to learn. And they don't really believe. I tell them that I'm going to learn a lot more from you than you learn from me, which is true. That's how you learn. And so that's how you keep growing as a leader and as a human being. I think the two are closely interlinked. And people that say, no, look, I passed that point where I'm not growing anymore. No, then you're on the way to the end of your life. I think I'm learning a tremendous amount right now, just in listening to some of the feedback, listening to you.
Well, and someone said earlier, I'm going to go up and find it. Jill said, back to this quiet quitting or whatever, resignation in place. And Jill, my comment would be, number one is, we say RIP when someone dies. Resignation in place, that's what it seems like to me, number one. And number two is, if we've stopped growing, Bill, to your point, then that's resignation in place, RIP, right? I've got a question, Bill, that I want to ask you that you probably weren't expecting, but it's one of the things I want to do before we finish. The question is, what's one thing that you've learned about learning? That's kind of what we were just talking about. And it's been in the chat, and it's certainly a part of our belief here at the Kevin Eikenberry Group, is that to be a better leader, we must continue to learn. What's one of the things that you've learned in your life, maybe beyond this piece about feedback you just mentioned? What have you learned about learning?
That you have to dig deep. Don't take the superficial. And if somebody says something to you that may feel a little bit offbeat, ask them to go deeper into that and understand where they're coming from. Why do you feel that way? Why would you do that? Help me understand. And I think that whole approach, just help me understand what you're thinking about. And can you take that a little bit deeper, is something I learned. I learned so much by asking people to explain what's behind that, or why are you emotionally upset about this? What did I do to make you angry? Please explain to me. I didn't intend to do that. And so then that's how I learned my mistakes. But more importantly, I learned more about where they're coming from and understanding people. And I think what I've learned over the years, people want to share with you who they are and what their feelings and what their emotions are, what their challenges are. And if you wonder why they're quitting, they'll always tell you they quit for more money. That's certainly not true. They quit because they weren't sure that anyone really cared about them in the organization. They didn't feel that they were fully included in the organization. So I think we learned so much by going deeper. So if I hear somebody is unhappy, hey, let's just talk about it. Tell me more about that. What's causing? What are we doing? What am I doing? What's the organization doing to make you feel unhappy? This is a great organization. There are great opportunities. Okay. And so I think probing deeper is what I've learned.
I love that. So everybody in the chat, give Bill some feedback, tell him thank you. Let him know that that we've appreciated his time, because I know that if you're in the airport, you're probably waiting to catch another flight.
No.
Oh, you're okay. Well, that's at least good.
I love this kind of dialogue. I'm learning so much. I'm watching the chat. I have to make sure my eye contact's not bad, because the chat.
Well, I know. Yeah,
and you're up there.
It's not like anyway, I'm not multitasking
I
here.
think feedback in the
hard,
chat's been
that.
very informative, and the way you use it is instructive. I'm learning from you about how to teach virtually online. Thank you. I'm embarrassed by these things. Oh, but I'm learning from you how to teach using it online, because I'm not very good at that, having eye contact here and watching the chat over here. So you're very good at it.
It's like everything else in life. it takes time to get better at it. And hopefully we have good people to learn from as well. And certainly we've learned a lot from you today, Bill. We appreciate the time. I've been looking forward to this conversation. Team, I'm going to let Adrian or somebody on the team give away another copy. We've got one more to give away. You guys decide who that is. And not to someone who already ordered a copy, so they don't win one. Sandy said she attended a session with you at Harvard, and so she knew what she was in for today.
Thank you, Sandy.
And so the team is going to give away another copy. Bill, thanks for being here. It was a pleasure to have you. And everybody, here's the deal. You're going to get the chance to answer the poll questions. And Robin apparently is the winner, according to Adrian. So Robin, we need you to send an email to info@virtualleadercon.com with your mailing address so we can send you this book. And so everybody, we're going to take one of the things that I learned from earlier virtual leader cons, Bill, is people need a longer break than I do. So we're going to take 30 minutes, everybody. Some of you that will be lunch. Some of you that will be some other time in your day. But we're going to start again in 30 minutes. And you can come right back to this place, refresh your page in 30 minutes, actually 29 minutes from right now. Bill, thanks so much for being here.
Hey, thank you,
everybody. We'll see you soon.
Before you close, Kevin, to say thank you for the work you're doing in developing leaders. We need, we're fellow travelers along the same journey. So it's a privilege to be with you. And, I think our mutual goal is to try to change leadership to make it more human and more effective for everyone so that we can make this world a better place for everyone. So thank you for what you're doing.
So true. And you're welcome.